Welcome back to another episode of Revealing Biblical Truths. Today's subject is regarding tithing. We will be looking at the following questions. What is a tithe? What was the purpose of the tithe in Tanakh? And do we need to keep the tithe today? First of all, the word tithe comes from the Hebrew word ma'aser, and is Strong's number 4643. It means a tenth part. Now let's look at some scripture to see what the tithe was used for. The first place it was used is in reference to Abraham, who gave a tenth of his spoils of war to Melchizedek. However, the Torah command for the tithe did not appear until the children of Israel were in the land. It appears in Numbers chapter 18, verses 24 through 28. But the tithes of the children of Israel, which they present as a contribution to Yahweh, I have given to the Levites as an inheritance. That is why I have said to them, among the children of Israel they have no inheritance. So first we see that Yah gave whatever tithes the children of Israel had to the Levites, because they had no inheritance. So first we see that Yah gave whatever tithes the children of Israel had to the Levites, because they had no land inheritance, as all the other tribes did. Speak to the Levites and say to them, when you take from the children of Israel the tithes which I have given you from them as your inheritance, then you shall present a contribution of it to Yahweh, a tenth of the tithe, and your contribution shall be reckoned to you as grain from the threshing floor, and as filling from the winepress. Thus you also present a contribution unto Yahweh from all your tithes which you receive from the children of Israel, and you shall give it from the contribution to Yahweh to Aaron the priest. From this passage it says that when the Levites received the tithes from the children of Israel, that they themselves were to take a tenth part of it, or a tithe, and present it to Yahweh by giving it to Aaron the high priest. It also says that the tithe was made up of grain and wine. It says nothing about money here. Let's continue reading. In Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 28 and 29, it states, At the end of every third year, you bring out all the tithe of your increase of that year, and store it up within your gates. And the Levite, because he has no portion or inheritance with you, and the sojourner, and the fatherless, and the widow who are within your gates, shall come and eat and be satisfied, so that Yahweh your Elohim does bless you in all the work of your hand which you do. So from this passage we can see a couple of things. First, tithing was continued year to year, but in the third year they were to give the tithe to the Levites, but also to the orphans and the widows, so they could eat. Secondly, if the tithe were talking about money, it wouldn't make any sense. People cannot eat money. Again, it must be talking about food, grain, and wine. The only application of money appears in Deuteronomy chapter 14 and is for a special situation. But when the way is too long for you, so that you are not able to bring the tithe, or when the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you, when Yahweh your Elohim is blessing you, then you shall give it in silver, and shall take the silver in your hand, and go to the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses. And you shall use the silver for whatever your being desires, for cattle or sheep, for wine or strong drink, for whatever your being desires. And you shall eat therefore before Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. So in this special circumstance, the person is too far away from the temple or tabernacle, and is unable to bring the food or animals with him. So instead he exchanges it for silver, but he still proceeds to go to the temple and exchange it back for food. So again, tithing refers to food only. In the Brit Hadashah, tithing is not mentioned except for a few places, and this is before the death of Mashiach. There is no mention of the New Testament believers storing up tithes. And there is only one place where it discusses collecting money, but let's look at that instance. And concerning the collections for the set-apart ones, you are to do as I gave orders to the assemblies of Galatia. Every day one of the week, let each one of you set aside storing up whatever he has prospered, so that there are no collections when I come. And when I come, whomever you approve by your letters, I shall send to bear your gift to Jerusalem. There are a few things to point out here in this passage. Number one, there is no mention of money. None. As in the Torah, any tithes are in the form of food and drinks. Secondly, this cannot be a tithe because it was done weekly and not annually as the Torah command dictates. Thirdly, in the Greek, this is rendered every first of the week. The word day is not in the Greek. So technically, it could be on a Monday or Tuesday. And that word for week is Shabbat again. Fourth, how many times did Paul come to Jerusalem in this context? Once. One time. He sent this letter to the assembly in Corinth to store up for a few weeks some food. And when Paul was going to Jerusalem, he was to give the money, to give the food to the people in Jerusalem for food. He also mentions that not everyone will have this, but only those approved by their letters. So, to recap, this collection of food was to go to the hungry people in Jerusalem and was a one-time thing. There are no other mentions of any collections being taken after this or before this or in any other letter that Paul wrote. And again, no mention of money at all. Context matters when we're reading the scriptures. The Bible does teach that we are to care for the sick, the poor, the orphans, and the widows. We are to give cheerfully. But there is no other command to give a tithe except once a year, and it was to be mainly for the Levites. Which brings me to another point. Once Yahusha died, he renewed the covenant with the children of Israel and Yehuda, and he became our high priest forever after the order of the Melchizedek. Therefore the Levite priesthood was no more. Maybe this is why there's no mention of tithing in the New Testament, because that part of the Torah is not applicable anymore. The tithe was meant to be for food for the Levites because they had no land inheritance. But now, since the priesthood has been changed, that mitzvah does not apply today, at least to the Levites. One could argue, however, that the law still applies regarding every third year giving our tithes, which is food, to the orphans and the widows. It is certainly something to think about and something we need to do, whether it's every third year or every day. Regardless, the collection of money is simply not in the scripture anywhere, and especially to use it to build gymnasiums, to be a wage for ministers, or to be a mortgage and utilities of a church building, which is found nowhere in scripture either. So study these things in detail and come up with what you think. If you enjoyed this teaching, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss out on future videos. Thanks for watching. Till next time, Shalom.